I've been tentacle deep in trash. Oh!
Last Raven, Pulverizer Route 2. Your eyes don't deceive you. I've dropped the new game restriction. This game is a nightmare enough on its own. This footage you're seeing is the general build, plus the tuning system that got ported over from Nexus. For those of you who are new, this video is part of a challenge run series called AC of Theseus. I'll put the rules off to the right. Tuning is focused on rounding out the poor EN resist the stock parts have, then on cooling and weight on the legs. This machine runs the 3TB booster, Congo generator tuned for capacity, plus Ananda combo for something different. The generator prioritizes regen above all, runs hot, and has a low capacity, but the condenser optional part evens out a bit. The rest of the optionals are a bit more freeform this time around due to having more slots. 10% shell and EN defense, stability plus 11% turning, and laser blade attack at 8%, switching off when needed. I go off this setup occasionally, and will have a paper doll in the left corner to show that, if I fail to mention it. The opening mission for this route is the easiest in the game, and the most obtuse for its S rank. You need to destroy every prop on the map, the kills are not relevant here. What trips up most people is the presence of these two support pillars in the center structure. You want to know they're destructible just by looking at them. Coming in straight from Silent Line, this game feels markedly faster yet generally harder to control. The camera is zoomed in more, the maps are smaller, and the starter parts lost their ability to overboost. Since Nexus, From has rebalanced and renamed all parts, there's enough options now that you don't feel pigeonholed into only a small handful of choices. However, on the flip side, blading has been borderline gutted. Gone is the vast majority of its tracking abilities. Each blade now has its own swing and recovery speed, they all gain the blade wave from OPI as a native attack, and there's a new system mechanic that allows you to damage and destroy individual parts, with different effects on each. Loss of arms removes the ability to use the weapon attached, destroying your head nukes your radar and FCS and causes errors in being able to track, and legs is supposed to hamper your mobility, but the booster remains unaffected and the need to walk is rare. If your chest is destroyed, you're instantly killed. However, this seldom happens. Blading takes the greatest advantage of this system, yet at the same time it's close to impossible to land hits on anyone anymore. Aerial tracking is straight up gone. Now if you're locked on and in the air, you get a very small upwards boost of momentum, and that's it. Post blade swing has a ton of recovery, landing no longer cancels it, and you just generally get more hard landings than ever before when using them. Ground blading is still generally too slow to be effective. Of all the solutions From took to fix aerial tracking for blades, this is not the one I would have liked. If I had to speculate, the tracking was gutted the way it was because From was scared players would just take a dump on everything if they could use their swords effectively. Actually, as I look at this in post, they may have been right because that is exactly what happens in this playthrough. Now it's just questionable having one on instead of dual wielding. The damage is not even all that great for how much effort you have to go through to land a hit. Oh yeah, and enemies when they explode now deal damage to the player. A first and only time this has ever happened in the series. Again, another screw you to blade users. Of course, this game's single player has a huge emphasis on AC versus AC encounters, and you know they made them move around in such a way that makes landing your blade attacks incredibly annoying. Some of them are just insanely evil in their design too, and the S-rank requirements are tighter than ever. I had to break my own rules several times for a few of them. The AI additionally cheats like right bastards. They all have op intensify this time around, they just blatantly input read you, and they have infinite energy. Running out and landing on the ground is much like staggers in AC6, a choice on their part they do not have to abide by. The trade-off is their programming is incredibly simplistic this time around. No joke to say that if it wasn't for their cheats, you could just steamroll this game with borderline zero effort. They make up for this by making the missions more demanding, requiring multiple back-to-back AC fights, removing all resupplies and missions, and having no qualms in setting up missions that are at their core anti-player. It's a mean game made by mean people. Last Raven is known for its difficulty. It's no joke to say that this is the hardest game in the series, even today. If you're a new player booting up the game for the first time, some of the starter missions you can select, you just have no hope of winning. They put these surprise AC fights at the end of them, and you get no notification that they are present. This marks the end of the Destroy Military Base, a very benign opening that is in reality a freebie. Much like the follow-up mission, Escort MT, same loadout as the first. S-rank here is just to get ahead of the target and kill everything in a timely fashion. This game seems to not grade you anymore on ammo costs, but now is purely on time and damage taken, with a few exceptions for defense missions. There is one mission that grades you on optional kills, and it is in this route as well. Just watch your radar here to keep on top of the spawns. Every time your escort goes into a room, a new wave of enemies will spawn, so clear out the room ahead of you and then double back and protect the backline. Casually, this game is really cool. It has a branching narrative system, with each route being 15 short, bite-sized missions that lead to one of 5 endings. The game accomplishes this by reusing maps and cutscenes in a really smart manner. favoring remixing encounters and objectives on each map to make them feel fresh. There is, of course, mission overlap between each of the routes. For example, the Zenaida path shares at least 50% of this route's missions. Since I've already covered New Game Zenaida previously on this channel, I figured, hey, it would be cool to do another route instead, mix things up a little. I originally wanted to do another New Game Fresh save run, but that involved grinding the arena a touch too much. And frankly, a bunch of parts that I consider quality of life are just not present in this route. The Moonlight, for instance, isn't present this run, nor is the turn speed optional. Moonlight in particular, I mention because it has the thickest blade of the lot, making air hits a touch easier to get. I do have to stress this, blades in this game are just straight bad. Easily the worst iteration in the series. And going forward, From ended up overcorrecting this with 4 and 4 answer, giving them more tracking than God and an insane lunge distance. I'm talking multiple football fields. So even the devs thought that this was just a bit too much of a nerf. You can get used to it and still appear to be effective with them, don't get me wrong, but make no mistake, they are still really bad. This game had, and still has really, a really sick competitive scene. I never took part in it, but I looked around a bit, seeing if anyone used blades in PvP, seeing as at the time I was really struggling with stabbing the AI. Only one name really cropped up, Heavenflame. To my understanding, she was the only decent blader, but stopped posting on GameFAQs back in 2008 or so. It's been quite some time, and the resources she links in those threads just no longer exist anymore. The videos are gone, and the old Armor Core website is defunct. I would have loved to pick her brain for a bit, but oh well. I just hope she's in good health and nothing bad happened. Shoutouts to those players. It took looking at their parts tier lists and the bands to finally grasp my head around the garage in this game and what to look for. It took me until 2018 to finally be able to beat the game and its more harder missions, and it's because of those lists. I just kept on coming at this game from an Armored Core 4 lens and tried using rifles solo, and it never worked out for me. Eliminate the enemy AC is where the first massive difficulty spike crops up. This mission is infamous for slaughtering new players. You get 2 AC fights back to back this level, and the S rank wants you to defeat both of them and either seemingly do so in 4 minutes or so, or not take a large amount of damage. I can't make heads or tails of the requirement. Both the ACs are at full AP, unlike the previous games. The first one, South Nail, is quite polite, all considered. As an RJ with snipers, he just hops around a ton and fires quite infrequently. The second one comes out after he goes down, so no friendly fire shenanigans this time around. The sniper can get stuck often. Blading him in the open is, as you can see, a utter crapshoot. All the AI in this game hops around and makes you want to consider a new career path when you try to stab them. Considering later games the studio makes puts ganks in them, seeing them take turns here when the design ethos is intended to be mean is quite shocking. Shows a level of restraint most wouldn't have. On the topic of restraint, I told a lie about blading not doing all that great damage. If you build your machine around it, put on quad legs so you get the better swing animation that hits twice, and a pair of arms that really cranks the damage, you can just deal nuclear amounts in a short amount of time. There's footage floating about of one player almost destroying the final Pulverizer in under 20 seconds. Just didn't believe in a damage opportunity and let it fly off. Right, rimfire. Reason why I brought the shade. Use the laser rifle because blading bullet life is just unadvised. The thing is armed with dual fingers, machine guns that crank out bullets like my country's national debt. Blinking at him with a standard rifle makes me want to die. So for the sake of expediency and my own sanity, I bring the laser rifle here, even though the ammo requirement doesn't really exist for this mission if you want the S rank. When you're out of range, he just flies at you in a straight line. Shooting missiles at him can cause his AI to break outright, loses track of you, and starts to spin in place. It's quite strange to witness. Notably, you can't run his ammo down. It almost looks like you can, but I swear it's an optical illusion. He does discard his fingers after a spell, but I do think the AI really does have infinite ammo, as I stalled him out for several minutes and his back chain gun never ran dry. This is one of the 2 levels I switched my generator for the G91. It's frankly a better combo to use with my current radiator. Basically nullifies booster heat, and the capacity in regen is really strong. It's not even that much heavier than the Congo. Strong enough that the combo has been up for consideration for being placed on the ban list, my understanding anyways. I swapped it out because the condenser optional part I use is basically required to make the Congo function. I took it off for the EN damage and fire rate optionals to work with the shade. But that's this gank put under wraps. I really wish I could figure out what makes the S rank tick for that level. Battle challenge now. The other level I brought the G91 to. As you can see by the paper doll, I still have it on even though I swapped my optional parts back over. There's no real motive here. I literally just forgot to switch my generator before jumping back in, is all. S rank is another instance of either time or damage taken. Still can't figure out what. You fight another AC here after these waves that's a tank. Dude's supposed to be named Phantom, but he's called Shade in the English releases. I didn't know that the rifles with text at the end in those brackets were still rifles, but had magazines in this game. Really cool to see too, since it takes the previous 2 or 3 options in Silent Line and ups it to near 10 to pick from. Blading might not have representation in multiplayer, but in single player on the other hand has several people posting up tech. and it's really cool to see, honestly. But they don't really cover the missions that I'm doing here. I checked starter AC Pulverizer. I use starter AC as a reference. And that gets you 2 videos of a guy fighting the quad variant. Both of them are the same guy. Dude's name is ProCal, I believe. And mind you, I get it. It's the most accessible unit of the bunch. You don't have anything locking the fight behind like a restriction of having to fight in AC or anything like that, and it's available right at the start of the mission. I totally understand why it's the only one recorded. As an aside, I really hated that unit casually. Now, I like him a lot more. He's like Sundowner after doing Fox Die. Quite the fair fella. Stratus is another machine that glitches out something fierce if you shoot missiles at it. You always get a free blade wave at the start, so that's cool. Turn radius is going to be on full display here, and why it's an incredibly important stat to have in these games. I don't know why missiles causes the AI to become basically stuck in place, but I'll take it any day of the week. Also got to destroy an arm here. Never saw that before this run. Only thing that could do that was the final Pulverizer, and when it did, you already lost by that point. If the AI was good, this thing would have stayed at range and backed off as much as possible. The programming is there for that kind of behavior too, but it's on the wrong kind of unit. After the AC goes down, you just mop up the remaining units. This is nothing special whatsoever. You're just shooting helicopters and they go down in like 2 or 3 shots. I don't even think they can hit you. It could be me and just miss and not understand why that thing didn't blow up the second shot at, but you know, things happen. I think of all the solo AC fights this playthrough, that one was the easiest of the bunch. Really simplistic S rank as well. Nothing really noteworthy. Right, destroy the control towers. The worst mission in the game, bar none. I don't even know if I want to commentate over this one. Just looking at the footage is pissing me off. That's how bad this is. As you can see, I broke basically every single rule regarding the weapons. I brought in the Spirit, a high laser that's basically an EM bazooka, instantly disqualified. The Kura micro missiles and the E92 RM3s as well for extensions, also disqualified. Also run the ELF3 blade as well for weight. If you fall in the water, it's an instant out of bounds. The S rank requires you to blow up at least 3 helicopters and one of the 2 beams in the water, and defeat both ACs at the end in under 120 seconds or something stupid like that, and potentially keep your ammo costs low. Just getting over to the dam is annoying enough with those large missile MTs. Get nailed by one of them, and you just restart the level. The first machine that shows up is a hovercraft that only sits on the water and deploys orbit guns to constantly chip at you. It's just infuriating. Theseus can't interact with that thing in such a way that would allow you to deal enough damage in a quick enough amount of time to get the S. The second guy is even more of a problem. He's an RJ that does nothing but fly around, and he chooses if he wants to land or not. So good luck blading that guy for damage. They both have full AP as well, mind you. This mission is just a fucking nightmare to S rank unless they use a hover leg and glitch out the first AC with a stagger loop in the corner. Micro missiles seem to be the only thing that can defeat the first dude quickly enough, and even then, it's incredibly inconsistent. The Spirit does work versus both of them, but it's no Kurosawa. The thing takes an age to lock on. Every shot is worth around 3 to 4 shade hits, and even then I run out of ammo by the end. If this was damage-based, it would be an entirely different discussion. It would be a slightly annoying mission to S-rank, but it would be very doable and quite memorable for its twist. But the time limit is just insanity, and it's not possible here. Maybe under a task or something. Otherwise, this is just random garbage. Pulling polar opposite keep-away mechs back-to-back is some shit a dickhead would do. I'm not kidding when I say it took me half a day to get an S rank here. I only caved on the restriction after 10 hours of attempts. And I got it twice, but the first time around, my OBS displayed a black screen, so I had to do the whole goddamn thing over again. So that was just lovely. The S rank does require you to beat both ACs. If you opt to bail and just leave the mission area, you only get an A. Just look at this RJ, man. Flying away and shooting missiles. I wasn't kidding when I said that I think the AI has infinite energy too. This thing is supposed to land every once in a while, but I've seen him just choose to ignore it and fly continuously for upwards of 3 or 4 minutes at a time. This is the most obnoxious thing I've ever seen. I want to go out on a limb and say this is the worst mission in the entire franchise. That's including that canyon mission in Another Age that out-of-bounds you if you run out of energy between the bases. Cool level conceptually, absolutely horrendous execution. If you want to be pedantic, you could say the run ends here. But I'm pushing through regardless, even if it shames me I couldn't meet the requirements. Destroy transport convoy. Gotta run Urchin inside mines in the ELF3 here. S rank is 120 seconds to beat both ACs, and you can't take more than, let's say, 2500 damage. This one is hell until you figure out the second AC is brain damage. The first one is a bipod that will refuse to work with you. Getting a blade on this thing is like pulling the hairs off your head with a pair of spoons. Either it stands still and deploys mines, or it flies around endlessly. There is no in-between. It can self-damage on those mines, but you'll win the lottery before you find a way to make that consistent. At half AP, the other bloke comes out. He is a heavy fuck that's slow and basically takes no goddamn damage, and still remains a nightmare to blade due to how his AI moves when up close with you, and how his rocket and rifle chunk you out of your S rank instantly. His AI has a critical flaw, in that the machine is piloted by a brain-damaged hippo manhandling the sticks with 2 small telescopic hand pointers. When you get to the side of it, the AI breaks down entirely. You'll eventually get behind it, and the scripting will hang on using its rocket several times while standing perfectly still before trying to jump and turn with you again. There's always been a soft ban on inside parts. I personally don't like using them all that much. Some, like these mines, are incredibly strong to the point where you could solo the entire game with them alone if so inclined. I never specified if you could use them or not, so it's technically fair game. You could make the same argument with hangers, but that would devolve the run into dual pistols, so that's staying banned. My first recording of this brought the spirit and called it hell. Really, only the first AC is annoying. The other one needs to see a doctor or something. Eliminate enemy patrols. On the other hand, the hardest part of this level is remembering where to go. S rank is time, you are under an ECM cloud, so your radar doesn't work, and your FCS loses lock often when you are in close quarters and want to stab people anyways. This head doesn't come with a map either. You need to commit to memory the route and where every enemy is before attempting this. I told another lie. The turn optional part is found on this level's S rank. It took me until this run to figure out it's here you get it in this game if you don't port it over from Nexus or Ninebreaker, and checking Blade and Grenade.Sakura for where it drops. Once again, the English Armored Core wiki drops the ball. Now for this game it only shows the dialogue for the briefing and exactly fuck all else. Incredibly helpful, I must say. The Kujaku radiator is also found on this level as an optional part on the ground in one of the side rooms. I don't grab it in this footage, and going for it while trying to get the S rank is a bit of a stretch. The ECM MTs are frankly the freest thing in this game, but the laser cannon guys can be really irritating with their ability to nail you as you go through a door or come around a corner. You can thankfully eat a hit 2 or 3 times, but after that it's probably going to affect your ranking. I touched on pacing in my last video, stating that 2 to 5 minute levels are the perfect length for this series. Generally, it seems the devs agreed with me on this sentiment, as the levels in this game are quite short, all considered. Later entries don't really deviate from this length either. I can't recall a mission in 4th or 5th gen that had you wait around as much as this one asks of you. Yet this one seems to be an exception. You spend most of the time here feeling lost, and everything looks the same. And some floors you can access by flying up to, which is cool, others behind elevators, and the doors are locked on some sides, requiring you to do some wonky pathing to get around them. Now, conceptually, this is fine, but I do think the elevators on this level bring the pace to a crawl. Couldn't tell you why there's as many lifts as there is, but you can't skip them. Silent Line had the little lip you can land on to bypass the weight, but here it's just strangely absent. It's really noticeable compared to the rest of the game. Short and sweet as a feather in this game's cap, so the contrast is stark. So I found out the other day that kangaroos can't hop backwards. Upon hearing this, my first thought was, wait, so if there's a dead end in Australia, it's gonna be populated by a bunch of rubones who got trapped. That's not the case, of course, but it was a funny thought. Since their tail is so muscular, it gets in the way, so they have to get on all fours and kinda strafe their way out to turn around fully. Crazy thing to learn about. I guess their evolution never had them contend with something that might force them to flee in tight spaces and instead stand their ground. Mother Nature is fascinating like that. I also discovered yesterday that gorillas are silly buggers. Saw a video on it. Did you know they were considered cryptids at one point? Human-like monsters until like 1847. And I saw a video that showed silverbacks might be some of the most patient and gentle parents I've ever seen, even though they look like brick shithouses ready to throw down at a moment's notice. This got me doing a little bit of research. It seems there's never been a recorded instance of a gorilla fatally attacking a human. You'd find anecdotal cases of it happening here and there, but it's incredibly rare for a gorilla to attack a human, never mind kill one. And it's not like we've been on this planet for a short amount of time either. Of the thousands of years that we've been here, you would think that there would be a couple more instances of it happening, but no. They're quite playful too, and seem to enjoy playing pranks on humans watching their enclosures and each other. This mission really is only difficult in that remembering where to go is the tricky part. Next mission is kinda on the same tier as well, but is a little bit more involved. Gotta have a couple freebies per playthrough, I suppose. For the other ECM level, make sure you meet at least 875 joules per cubic meter. I did this via the Siren 4 radar, ECM optional, and tuning my head for ECM resist. Should have just changed my FCS instead and used a lesser radar. This box design is just really ugly to me. Going fast is the exact opposite of what you need to do for the S rank here. Instead, you just need to go around and just defeat enemies until a 30-second timer shows up at the top. Nothing particularly challenging shows up here. Sniper MTs are the scariest thing. They might accost you and cause a stagger for a little over 400 AP a hit. Mild nuisances to dispatch at worst. There's these jet MTs that could be considered annoying to hit, but they're not really threatening. The missiles are going to be the most tricky thing to deal with, but hopping around in circles should dodge most of them. Looking at this map, I wonder if this is an arena level that got repurposed as a story mode location. This zone just screams boss arena to me, and I don't think the MTs here complement the design all that well. You can fight a Pulverizer here, but it's not present on this route. But yeah, gorillas. There's this one example, Halko, I think his name is. Father of 4 and loves to play with his kids. But mom isn't too hot with this big lad playing with him when they're so young. His solution to this was to abduct his kids and run off with them in front of mom for every single one of his children. She runs around chasing after him, making the whole thing this big game. This huge 500-pound unit of a mammal, this dude eats 40 pounds of food a day and can peel a tree like it's a banana. Skedaddling about was quite the amusing sight. He just runs around like how you would expect your dad would, with the kid in the crook of his arm. You could almost see the look of pride in his face, but I'm sure that's just me projecting emotions onto him. These guys love playing in water too, but you should see them when it rains, acting like it's pure acid and the worst thing in recorded history. It's quite funny. It didn't help that King Kong attempted to solidify their depiction as monsters, even if it was entirely on accident when attempting to compete with Godzilla. For a long time, we thought they had bloody maws when we spotted them in the wild, but instead it was just their diet coloring their teeth. You probably recall Harambe, but it's not the first time a kid has fallen into an enclosure. Side note, strangely, the friend I mentioned in the previous video who was doing that difficulty list had this come up as a conversation about a week or two ago. Now I'm looking up gorilla facts for an entirely different reason. Funny how that works. Brookfield Zoo outside Chicago had a 3-year-old fall in the pen and fall unconscious back in '96. One of the gorillas helped the boy, cradling the child and taking him to a service door so the zookeepers could retrieve him. It's now a common example cited in the argument of empathy in animals. Some try to refute it by saying it was this training, since the ape in question was raised in captivity, but it happened again some years prior with a wild one. In '86, a 5-year-old fell into the pit and fell unconscious. God, that sounds really bad out of context, and why is it always 3 to 5-year-olds? My stupid ass is now envisioning like this mosh pit filled to the brim with gorillas and this poor little 5-year-old gets chucked in. It's just, oh, I'm really stupid sometimes, holy hell. It's still tickling me, goddammit. But that's the end of the main ECM missions. There's one more, but it's a bit later. Evidently, this is the first time I've ever S-ranked that mission. Shutdown Energy Plant, your first encounter with a Pulverizer. At least on this run, anyways. I bring a Shade and the ELF-3 blade here. Read somewhere that this blade does a ton of damage to Panzer Messiah, but it seems to do about the same as the Moonlight. Cheaper to swing though, very helpful that cost reduction. The S rank here, I honestly can't begin to make heads or tails of what it asks of you. I know that it's impossible to get if you don't fight the AC and Pulverizer at the end. I tried bringing the Shade to shave ammo costs, taking incredibly low amounts of damage, beating the mission quickly, even did attempts where I killed every enemy on the map. All kept on giving me every rank in the book. This one could be the amount of hits taken at the very end, or how much energy you burn as you move through the level, or even how many times it gets set on fire, for all I know. These flamethrower units are bloody cunts, by the way. It took a bunch of attempts to get down blading them in this side room without getting burnt. That they deal damage as well on their death rattle is really annoying. It's present for a long ass time, that hitbox. Be very mindful of it. You can also see some close-ups of the sprite army men on the side pathways. Really cool. It gives you a nice sense of scale, and I don't think AC does that ever again after this game. But to continue, 86, 5-year-old fell into the pit. Jambo, a western gorilla, stood guard over the boy until he came to, even stroking his back to seemingly comfort him. When he woke up and understandably started to wail the child, the gorilla, instead of freaking out, gathered the other apes onto one side of the enclosure so responders could rescue the child. Sadly, Jambo died back in '92. The other one's still alive. She's 37 now, I think? Has grandkids. I'm not going to say her name as it's in Swahili and I'll just butcher it something fierce. What I'm trying to say, though, is not all gorillas are pure assholes like Gorilla Mask and God Hand. Outside of looking up eclectic animal facts, I've been looking into manhwas for a couple of years now, I would say. They are the Korean equivalent of manga, if you didn't know. It was just something I stumbled into on a whim one day. The first one I finally took a gander at was, I want to say, Player Who Returned After 10,000 Years. It was the cover that got me. The presence of the colors behind the dude and that bellowing raggy cloak. I checked it out. First chapter opens up with these really impressive pieces of a hellish landscape, and a battle happening between this lion-looking dude you assume is the main character and a golem guy. Going for it, I am robbed of my vision, as the starting head has no night vision. Not you guys, though. Here's an effect that cooked up in Resolve. You guys can see, but hold on, wait a second. Had to memorize the route back and use the lights as a point of reference while stumbling around in the dark. Yeah, that sounds right. But it shows a bunch of really cool action pieces, and then chapter 2 comes and it flips the script and revealed that the lion isn't the main character at all. He reports to this dude who looks even cooler. So I was sold on it. Skimmed through the panels as you do, admiring the artwork and not really caring for the plot. Fell off with it as it kind of grew dull to me. I didn't really grasp the medium or how prolific it was. GFOS here has the same AI as the Fatty and Destroy Transport Convoy, but now the room is too small to really take advantage of it. He might as well be running Theseus, armed with a rifle and blade and a rocket pack on his shoulder. Really hard to get blade hits on due to his movement patterns. Trying to swing at him when it's basically pitch black doesn't help things. Wish I could say there's a trick here, but it's really just try to get a read on his movements and fall down into an air blade slash on him, since swinging on the ground will borderline never connect. Pretty sure you need to beat him quickly, too, for the S rank. But I browsed around a bit more before finding The World Out of the Fall. It was a new release at the time. Again, the cover is what got me. The spiky hair, raggedy clothes, and bellowing cloak. Thought, well, hold on now. This is the same author or something. Might as well be the exact same character. There's a ton of copying going around in that industry, and I guess Korean media in general? I don't know enough to speak on that, though. But after the fall opens up, and you see this impressive panel of this tower and a cityscape below it. You know me, towers in literature get me at half-mast, and it introduces a system-like MMO message system that I later found out is basically everywhere. And the world is under an apocalypse. You get your introduction shot with the main character, a chiseled specimen of a man, could forge a bloody sword on the side of his nose, and he's just straight up slaying monsters like a unit and going in like just look at him. Oh my god. Just look at this dude. The robes in the back, the MTI that solo leveling does, even though I didn't know it at the time. They showcase the main guy, he has a best friend, and they fight together. Only to go down 2 more panels and he's already gotten murked. Can't even die in this meeting without looking like a badass. Just look at the composition here, though. The last time I saw something of this kind of fidelity was freaking Vagabond. It's doing a great job of chasing after Berserk's coattails, in my opinion. This Pulverizer is doing its best to shy away from greatness. Only thing it does is fly away from you and shoot its laser cannons. When you get close, it throws out its huge active hurt box with its blade arms that are egregious in size. Don't get hit by it if you can. This thing loves to park its ass against the wall occasionally, and is profoundly annoying. Thankfully, its turn rate is straight ass, so you can get behind it easy. I think I got a really lucky core destruction here. It usually takes 8 slashes, but in the footage it went down in 3. It might be the only Pulverizer that has part destruction enabled on it. I don't know why they gave the blades for Arm Boss the keep away AI, considering several ACs would have benefited from it, but here we are. Yeah, that's a Kurosawa. I'm a fucking scrub. I caved on this mission. I couldn't. The S rank here is to not let a single allied MT be destroyed. 80% of this mission plays itself to shoot the drones in a timely manner in the second room and camp the end tunnel. The ending bit, on the other hand, has those jet MTs fly in, but where they go is entirely random. They usually beeline for one of your allies, and trying to get their aggro is also random. Keeping it is really temperamental and not conducive of a good time. This isn't a hard mission by any metric. It's just garbage and it has nothing to do with you. And it's back-ended by a random encounter that just serves to waste your time. It's a pain in the ass to S rank regardless of what you bring. I'm not inclined to waste my life clock on this one, and if I could, I would have picked literally any other mission to substitute with this one. Shit, where was I? Oh yeah, then the protagonist walks into a fucking door of light. Oh my god, he looks sick. Then he starts to battle a goddamn ice dragon by himself, while affirming that he's gonna climb the living fuck out of this tower. This is all chapter 1. The pace was something I never saw before. Just breakneck speed and flows through the scrolling nature of the medium. I was giga sold. I binged the 15 chapters that were available, then at that point I clicked off and I needed to know who drew it. Surely this had to be the big leagues. Just look at the quality. I still keep up with After the Fall even today. It consistently showcases some of the most impressive panels I've seen in a very long time. They're just downright striking at times and take your breath away. I do recommend. They're looking around though, I found out it was Redice who did it. Same guys behind Solo Leveling. That led me to discovering Omniscient Reader's viewpoint and Pick Me Up. I might not care for Pick Me Up all that much, but Omniscient Reader is a rare instance where the art is solid and I legitimately cared for the story. Fuck that mission, by the way, get it off my screen. This mission, I don't even know if I need to say anything. You need to stab a train, and there's like 7 enemies in total. Just shoot them from afar, really. I'm willing to go so far as to say that I don't think this mission belongs in Last Raven. The quality is just not up to snuff, and they don't ask anything of you in this mission. But regarding Omniscient Reader, every time I tried to guess where a scene would go, time and time again, the author Sing Shong would subvert my expectations. It's incredibly consistent at it. I burned through the 80 or so chapters that were available, and ended up buying the book. Thing's a bloody tome. Over 12,000 pages and 1 million words. I was unemployed at the time, and it took me over a week to burn through that thing, pulling 6 to 8 hour reading sessions in between the job hunt. Was sick as hell. A lot of stuff going on, and ended up wrapping up the story in an incredibly memorable way. Translation job was really good too. If you told me that was written in English instead of Korean, I would have believed you. 1 or 2 of the overall arcs though could have gone. The whole undercover shtick and the Wukong subplot just dragged on, especially after how interesting and dealing with the Apocalypse Dragon's tail flips were. If you happen to be reading the webtoon, I'm not going to spoil it by talking any more on it. I'm really excited to see how it depicts all the scenes coming up. I think they're in the Demon King of Salvation arc right now, too. I hope that mech looks cool. Defeat the invading force as another Pulverizer show up, the quad variant this time around. Don't know why, but the follow-up mission never procced when I was recording. Had to go back and shoot it post-game. Was the strangest thing. Couldn't find anyone mentioning it happening anywhere. The missile MTs make a return from the dam mission, and they're still just as irritating to deal with as they were there, even with the open space to move around it. Their tracking is just too much, and they last too long. They're probably fair and balanced in PvP, but man, it's still annoying. The S rank might legitimately be time-based. I take a beating from the Pulverizer, and the game lets me me off with an S. Getting to them only involves shooting this small group of MTs. They are borderline harmless. They also could potentially be ammo related, but I'm not sure. I need to do more testing on it. But you would think, I discovered redice. Surely I would move over to solo leveling. The zenith of the medium in terms of visuals, right? Nah, kept putting it off. Did so for several years. Bounced around between my blasted reincarnated life. That's been on hiatus for 2 years now. Level Up with the Gods, wearing its solo leveling influence on its sleeve. Also constantly on hiatus. Get well soon, drawing man. Quad Pulverizer is, as I said, really fair, especially coming from the tank variant. He's aggressive, still beams you with the cannons, but now you can actually juke him really well and evade his blade slashes. It's even possible to stagger him before he gets a swing off. Always hated this guy casually. Now he might be my favorite of the bunch. Shit, I went through the entirety of Tower of God, the monolith that's been there since the hills, and the beginning after the end before I touched solo leveling. Tower of God's okay. Its world is interesting, but the method of delivering the story is kinda ass, and the art is so-so. Sometimes it looks quite nice, but the majority is pretty bad. Story should have wrapped up years ago, cut out like half the arcs. It's been 12 years and it's still not even at the midway point from the looks of it. It has gotten multiple seasons of anime though. The first season looked quite pleasant to look at, but the second one is... it's disappointing. I wish they got that first studio back, but it's probably just not on the cards. Beginning after the end is another case where the world is more interesting than the plot in question. But the art was really good for a good spell. At least before they switched studios several times. It still looks nice now, don't get me wrong, but it's not as good. You can tell by looking at it. I heard it's also getting an anime soon. They're starting off with Arthur's early childhood, and I can't think of anything more boring to do. It's good for world building at least. The light novels are surprisingly solid though for them. I really don't care for the majority of the side characters, but the world building is quite interesting, like especially when they start exploring that other continent. First time I ever got an S rank on this mission. So when this mission shows up properly, you want to build around getting your ECM resist to above 900 joules per cubic meter, sack stability, and run the ECM optional part with the Siren 3 radar. Also swapped out my FCS. Head is still tuned for ECM, but in all honesty I just forgot to tune it back after the first ECM mission. Exact same map is a bit of a bummer, and the laser MTs being present is a super bummer. They tend to spawn behind you and beam you in a frame. It's not fun to deal with. The format is the exact same as the previous level, and knowing that this is supposed to be a follow-up that shows up every time instead of something that's skippable legit has me thinking a bit less of this game. It's just a pace killer. Have you do the same mission twice in a row is just silly. The end opponent is different here at least, but everything leading up to it is functionally the same. So it took me several years to get to solo leveling. Guess I thought daggers and necromancers were just uncool or something. One evening after getting home from work, I said, screw it, I got nothing else better to do tonight. Let's take a look at this and finally see what it's about. Started reading it, and I forgot to sleep that evening. I was like a kid enthralled with a new game, staying up throughout the night out of sheer excitement. It was awful on me the following day. When my then boss asked me if I was good, I told him about it. He then asked if it was worth it. I had to think about it for a second, and responded with an enthusiastic, fuck yeah it was. He never got the appeal of it though when I tried showing it him. Oh well. The story is beyond ass, but that whole premise is rule of cool first above all, and I adore it for that reason. I suppose I should talk about what's going on the screen. To my understanding, this guy comes out of left field and just starts preaching to me about strength or something. Frankly, I've never seen this guy before or spoken with him once in my life, so I got no idea what he's on about. I think his name is John? Something along those lines. He's a fat ass whose machine is overweight, so I got no respect for him. Poor thing is struggling to move around. Not the hardest to set up a blade loop on, but he can be a little bit annoying at times. Only because his entire movement pattern is fly away from you at the slowest pace humanly possible. He's got a Kurosawa, but he doesn't have enough energy to even shoot the bloody thing. He rarely gets shots off. Dobu went out of his way to make the most mind-blowing visuals for the most forgettable story. You see his influence everywhere now. The blacks with no shading to give hair and clothes that pop in the screen, the blue-eyed bleed effect in motion. No one has really replicated the look of the Shadow Army, but that's an incredibly tall order. Those early chapters just looked utterly phenomenal. I was captivated by it. Binged it once, then looked through it again a week later just to admire the art. Every panel is a potential wallpaper. Shit, probably should talk about the game again. Heaven's Ray has an AC fight at the start and the bipedal pulverizer on the latter half. Brought the shade here, once again not for ammo, but just for my own sanity. It's more effective to let Heaven's Ray chase after you as you pelt him than trying to blade this fellow. The S rank, well, I've given up trying to figure out what gives him at this point. I took around 5k damage and finished the level in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That seemed to be enough. I keep the radar on from the previous mission. This allows me to be above the ECM threshold when he deploys his pods. I want to say this guy is somewhat harmless, but the dual missiles on his back are quite damaging if they hit you. The pulse gun, on the other hand, might be one of the more anemic options available in this game. His AI might be like rimfire and bug out when you shoot missiles at it, but that's not something I ever tested, and it's just speculation on my part. You end up fighting this guy in multiple routes when he's in several different states of damage. Makes me wonder if he was supposed to have more presence at one point. In my eyes, he's just some kid in a hallway that rushes at you. This Pulverizer coming up, on the other hand, is a bit of a dickhead. It's at this phase going forward, these blokes start tweaking on you constantly like a below-average Guilty Gear player. This one in particular has a very nasty melee combo that chunks the daylights out of you. You can still find instances where you can get behind him, but his mobility is really cranked to make up for that deficiency in his programming. All that said, I believe he's the easiest of the bunch to land blade hits on. He stands still while he fires the laser cannons at you, and always tries is to close the gap between the two of you. Those standing poses he does are windows of damage opportunity, and when he charges at you, you can meet him in the air and cause the model to slide off and force the swing to pass harmlessly above you as you get your own in, or at least as harmless as can be. His moonlights may or may not only do 500 damage, so this guy just looks more threatening than he actually is. His ground swings though do a chunk, and the tracking on those swings can have some really obnoxious interactions that just seem to follow you endlessly if you're only backing up. Strafing to the side appears to prevent that from happening, but that's speculation on my part and it may be inconsistent. But we are rapidly approaching the end of the route. When you're out of those points of frustration, the game just flies by you real quick. Even immediately after this run, I was tempted to have another go at the game. Just love when video games put that feeling in you. But I don't love that mandatory stagger on the cutscene transition. Shit's whack. Was that my client that just blew up? Damn, I don't think I'm getting paid anymore. Final level, brought the radar from the last two missions, just because I forgot to take it off. The extensions I brought in got discarded immediately. I was experimenting with how much health this first unit has, and the answer is not all that much. All it does is just sit up there out of range and tweak about. Its orbit guns don't do all that much damage. It still has laser cannons, but the thing is so far away, you can just dodge it effortlessly. I ended up just missiling the thing to death. Not out of fear or anything, mind you, but because its movement speed is so fast and it's so far away, projectiles have a hard time landing hits on it. This thing might only have like 2,000 or 3,000 AP in total. I question the reason why it's here. Is it just there to do 1,000 chip damage before you fight the Pulverizer up ahead? I don't think it adds anything. One of the routes has a sequence where you're just dodging like suicide bombs, and that's more interesting and more demanding than fighting that thing. Also, fun fact, when I first went through this area on my first recording, I thought that this door just led nowhere, so I ended up going around and trying to figure out where the hell I needed to be. It's like an airlock, but there's no sound effect on it. Kind of bugs me when I think about it because you end up interacting with that door multiple times in this game through various routes. Final boss, reminiscent of the final Pulverizer, but not quite there. It lacks the blue color scheme of its more juiced counterpart, and only has a fraction of the total aggression and moves the Uber version packs. Notably, when it shields, it does a barrage of laser blasts instead of the more concentrated, high damage, clip you when you're close because fuck you beams. This damn thing spends a lot of its time floating above you. I need another 4 parallel universes of understanding to fathom why the flying unit that's so tall it can't even reach you when it touches the ground has a pair of blades that earnestly attempts to use. It just seems like it's a conflict of interests. Like the goal was originally meant to make this thing look cool, not really functional. But every time it does a slash, you get a free slash of your own. You can damage trade with it if you really want to. Your moonlight will kill it before it can kill you. Whenever it does that sequence of pulse attacks that the Uber has a hit scan variant of, you can also get a free blade on it. It's more efficient to go for the blade and cancel him doing it that way than it is to eat the damage from the hit scan. You'll legitimately end up taking less damage overall if you do that. There's another damage opportunity here as it's coming out of its shield. There's a brief moment where the shield is coming down, but you're still allowed to get a hit in before it can move. Great opportunity for a blade. This might be an instance where I should not have brought the shade and instead a rifle. The constant energy drain is a real hamper when it comes to moving around, and the missile pack is just straight up overkill. I could have brought the one down from it, and that would have allowed me to lock on significantly quicker, unlike this one where it just takes too long to be effective. I think I end up discarding it too in order to move around faster. I really don't know why I'm playing so scared here. There's plenty of opportunities to go in for a blade swing that I just don't take and instead opt for a missile barrage. Guess I was giving this unit way too much respect. I need to get around to checking out the solo leveling anime though. I've heard good things about it, but I've always thought that there's just no way it's meeting up with the manhwa. The format's just too different. But that's the end of the game. This thing is no final Pulverizer. I'll see you fellas after the cutscene. Here is the proof of the S rank for the final mission. I'm a bit divided on Last Raven these days. It's known as the hardest game in the series, but every time I come back to it, I discover a lot of it is more by nature being designed by assholes rather than anything truly demanding. Feels like most of the difficulty is just smoke and mirrors. Either the missions are insanely annoying or an utter cakewalk. It's whiplash in its intensity, and I don't think it's good for pacing. The AI being as dumb and exploitable as it is makes me question if it was even hard at all. I can look at it objectively, considering that quite a few of the levels had save states, and the ones that did typically had me attempting the section at least 100 times before you saw what's in the video. So yes, the game really is hard. But it's always been a case of throw your head at it until you discover how to break the AI on accident. You didn't even have to look anything up for this one. Maybe the game had a troubled development. It did come out a year before AC4, and that was on totally different hardware. Anyways, thank you for giving me some time in your day, and I'll see you Starside.
This is my job.
Death comes to us all, Raven.
Everything has been leading up to this moment.
Do the impossible, see the invisible. Row, row, fight the power, touch the untouchable, break the unbreakable. Row, row, fight the power, power to